Today I want to show you how to pollinate a squash, a cucumber, a zucchini. Same technique, same idea. Why would you want to do it? Because it might give you a better yield, number one. Number two, maybe you're struggling, you're not getting enough bees or pollinators out. The first thing you're going to need to know to pollinate your squash, zucchini, cucumber, what have you, is you're going to need to know the difference between the male flowers and the female flowers. So I'll give you an example. Here is an example of a male flower. You can see it here. And the way you can tell, there's really two distinctions that make it very clear. Number one, there is no fruit below it. And if you look inside the male flower, you see one single appendage in the male flower. And this is in contrast to what you see here. Looking inside the female flower, you see something totally different. When I put this next to a female flower, you can clearly see there's kind of a baby squash in this situation. Now you may say, okay, I'm not doing squash, I'm doing cucumbers or maybe a zucchini. It's going to look more like this. You can notice here, this actually is a summer squash, but it looks somewhat similar except for you might have something more like on a cucumber, kind of little spikes or hairs on there, but it's still going to look quite similar to this. This is how you know you have a female cucumber or a female zucchini. But once you have those two, then you can simply come along and you can start to, and you simply begin to peel back until you have just the male portion of the flower left. And then you're ready to do your pollinating. And then you can simply insert this right into the female part and just rub it around in there, and you're going to be spreading the pollen. You're basically doing what the bees would have been doing or will be doing for you. You only have a few hours. You really only have a few hours of a window. Typically for me, it's in the morning. The flowers open up maybe just after light comes out, and as they open up, you have just a few hours before they close again. And for mine, that's about it. So you want to make sure to take that time. If you have the opportunity to do it, you can pollinate your flower just like this. By doing this, you may have more cucumber, squash, zucchini growing on the very same vine. Now, sometimes you may do this and you may see later on that some of the squash down the line, further on from the stem or the base of the plant, don't end up making it. They kind of turn a more of a yellowish color and end up dying. And my conclusion why this happens, I think sometimes the plant says, hey, we need to focus on this main squash, and we don't want to have a chance that we lose two of them. And we want to have at least one to go on and perpetuate the line of this particular plant. So sometimes it won't work. But if you have really good, healthy soil, well composted, or you have plenty of nutrition in your soil, it shouldn't be as much of a problem. But that's just something to consider. Now here's one before it is pollinated. And this is soon after pollination. And here you can see one getting bigger now, and then one that's really coming along at this point, but I don't have any that are ready to actually harvest at this point. One of the reasons I love squash so much is because, well, some of them have very good taste. Some squash is just, to me, almost tasteless and worthless. And when I'm picking plants, yes, I do want food, I want nutrition, but I also want something that tastes good. I can grow food that I will never be able to get at the grocery store. That's the whole point. To me, I don't, many times you're not going to want to grow things that you could just pick up at the grocery store. Well, okay, yes, it's going to be healthier probably if you're not using all kinds of pesticides, but you get to buy seeds of plants that never will show up in the typical grocery store. And it's exciting. So every year you have a special time of year where you get to eat food that nobody else is eating except for, gardeners or farmers out there. But because many of these things simply are not found there. Another factor that I consider is I want plants that are going to not only taste good. See, if you're going to grow your own food, having premium quality flavor is very important. So you may try several different varieties, but when it comes to squash, Squash, you can't just plant 10 different varieties of squash in your garden and save the seeds from them. You can, but next year you have no idea what you're going to get because they're going to cross-pollinate and you're going to have all different kinds of things. Now, there's 4 or 5 main kinds of squash plants, different species of squash plants, I should say, and you can plant all 4 species next to each other, and there's many varieties within each species. So what you could do is one year, you could plant 20, 30 varieties if you want. Find the ones that do best in your soil, in your locale, or taste the best, or store the best, or whatever you're looking for, and then you know, okay, I can't save the seeds from the year where I had 20, 30 varieties, but I can pick the best ones from each one of the different species like Maxima, Mixta, Peppo, these various different species, and you could have one from each species. You can have all 4 of them growing in your garden, and you can save seeds then without them cross-pollinating and being a problem. So this is fantastic, but if you're going to have 2 varieties of the same species, they have to be something like a quarter-mile away from each other, which is pretty significant. If you're living in the city, that's going to be almost impossible to do, but if you live way out in the middle of nowhere like I do, that may be an option if you have a big enough property. But another factor that I like to consider is I want my food to have incredible storability. Now, not everything is easily storable. Like, there are actually tomatoes that you can store for months. Fresh tomatoes sitting in your house, storage tomatoes. And squash also, much more than 6 months. There are squash, the variety I'm growing here should be able to get a year or more just sitting in your house. The one that I grew last year is upwards of 2 years. You can just sit it on your kitchen table for 2 years. You don't have to do anything. It's like a time capsule just sitting there, and it will taste just as good maybe 2 years in as when after you cured it. And you say, what is curing? I did a video on that. I'm going to put a link at the end. You don't want to miss. You do, if you're growing squash and if you want your squash to taste the best, you typically, unless it's summer squash, if it's a winter squash variety, what you want to do is you want to let it cure. And like I said, I'll put a link so that you can see how to cure your squash for best results. And I'd like to know from you, do you have any favorite varieties of squash that you like to grow that either have really good taste, or do you know any varieties that have really long storability? I'm making a video series, a 5-hour-long series. I don't know that I'll put it on the YouTube channel, but a video series on plants to grow in difficult times and what are foods that can give you both good nutrition, but on top of good nutrition, things that store well so that you can have food for the long haul or even in difficult times. So if you have any questions, comments, please share them down below. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button. God bless and have a fantastic day.